Okay, here we are again. I'm here with Trevor Levure, who's back by popular demand.
Hello.
His Levure presentation last time went down so well. We've brought him back. I'm going to tell you more about Levure and Git and all sorts of good stuff. So I'm just going to see if people are joining again. Oh, look, yes, we've got 53 people arriving. This is excellent. Hello, everybody. And I see that Tim Cook has also got the link. This is good. Okay, so Trevor, it's over to you. I'm going to put you full screen.
All right.
Away you go.
All right, thanks, Heather. I appreciate it. All right, hello, everyone. We're going to get started now. For this presentation, the title of this presentation is how to how to manage a Levure application with Git. Now, I'm going to be using Levure, the Levure framework, to create an application and to go through our examples. Go through the example today. This what I'm going to show you, though, it's not anything that has to be. It's not specific to Levure. It could be used with any LiveCode application where you're using primarily script-only stacks for all of your code, so that all your code's stored in text files rather than binary files. And what I'm going to be showing you are techniques that are commonly used in other development environments. For example, we use it with our Ember application that we develop. We also use it with our Ruby on Rails applications that we develop, and we'll use these techniques with a lot of different developers. So
comments in the chat there, Trevor, that people are having trouble.
Let's see.
Just give it a minute. Maybe. Sound, no video. This is worrying.
You see and hear me though, right?
I can see you. Yes, and you can see me.
Yes.
Ah, somebody says now okay. I think there was just a slight delay.
Okay. All right, let's try this again.
Right. If you want to go again from the top, then
I will go from the top.
Off you go.
All right, everyone, take two. So hopefully everyone can see and hear me now. So welcome to the session. This session is titled Managing Levure Applications with Git. The purpose of this presentation is going to be to introduce some, if you're not familiar with using Git, introducing some Git workflows that show you how you can use a version control system like Git with a LiveCode application. I'm going to be using a Levure application. Levure is an application framework that helps you organize all your content in a way that it plays well with version control. So what that means is most of your LiveCode script is stored in text files and script-only stacks, and it makes it so. So the point is, you could use it. What I'm going to show you is not going to be specific to just Levure. You might have your own framework that you develop LiveCode applications in, and you could use these techniques with that application as well, assuming that you store all your code in script-only stacks. The techniques I'm going to show you are also used by other developers in other environments. We use the techniques I'm going to be showing you with our Ember applications that we develop with Ruby on Rails, and we've used it with many developers over many years. So with that, I'm going to switch over to the slide presentation, and we'll get started. And after we go through a couple different slides and an introduction to the concepts that we're going to be talking about, then we'll switch over to LiveCode and some other tools and get our hands dirty. So let's turn on screen. See the slides now, and so managing a Levure application with Git. So for an introduction, I want to tell you what this presentation is and what this presentation is not. We're going to look at managing development of a LiveCode application using Git. This is not an introduction to Git. I'm not going to show you how to set Git up. I'm not going to go into detail about what all the commands are. There's a wealth of information on that on the web. But what I am going to do is show you how you can use Git to kind of manage the development of a live code application. You'll see on this slide, I have and these slides are available in the resources that Heather will make available later on. But there's a link to that I found on the Git site that's getting started, about version control. It's a very good book to go through. There's also some links in a README file that I've prepared that will be made available to you that has links that to some other tutorials that talk about different workflows with Git. I'm going to show you one approach. There are a number of different there's a number of different ways that you can approach your development. So with that, let's go to why would you want to use Git. These are some reasons that you might want to use Git, and most of these reasons apply even if you are the only person working on your application. The first is that I really think is important is creating an audit history of every change made to your application. As you'll see in just a bit, when you are working with Git, every time what you like to do is Git is about snapshots. You're taking snapshots of what a folder looks like over time. And in this case, in our situation, the folder happens to be an application development, all of our application files. And so you can take snapshots incrementally. So as you make small changes, you can take a snapshot, and then you have this nice history showing all the changes that were made to your application. If you break something, it's easy to go back and see. You can roll back the application and keep going back in time until you get to a point where it wasn't broken. And it's easy to see what might have broken the app. Next reason is when you're using Git, you're able to work on multiple features in isolation. We'll talk about the concept of a branch in Git. And when we're working with branches, we are able to have our own little workspace for each feature that we're working on. And regardless of whether you're working with a team or not, that can be beneficial, because you may have one feature that's finished before another, and you can release it without having to worry about something being in a broken state because the other feature you're working on isn't done yet. You can also work on bug fixes in isolation, and you can be working on multiple bug fixes at a time. You may have a situation where you're working on a bug and you realize that the fix requires you're going to need some changes from a third party, like maybe you need a fix to the LiveCode engine, or maybe there's an external that you need some fixes from. Well, you can have this isolated area where you're working on that bug fix. All your changes you've made will stay in that area until until maybe it takes a couple weeks or a couple days to get the changes you need. You can come back to that bug fix later once you get all the necessary resources that you need to fix it. So next reason, facilitates code review before changes are introduced. What you're going to see as when we go through some examples here is that Git doesn't, whenever you make changes to files in a folder that's being monitored by Git, Git will show you what changes have been made. But you don't actually, we call it committing, you don't actually commit those changes to the Git repository without first going through a little review process. And that's a great way, even if you're just a single developer working on an application, it's a great, you can use that opportunity to look at the changes you made, make sure they make sense, make sure you didn't do something wrong. I catch a lot of mistakes when I'm going through this process of committing the changes to the repository after I think I'm done making the code changes. You can store snapshots of every release of your application. So every time you put a release out there, that maybe you package up you build an installer and you send it out to your customers, you can store you can use what are called tags to tag that particular snapshot so that you can always go back and test the app in the state that it was in when you released version 1 or version 1.01. And lastly, when you're using Git, you can collaborate with other programmers, and that may or may not be important to you, but if you're using Git, even if you're not using other programmers currently, it will make it easier to bring other programmers on later on. And that's when these other bullet points of working on multiple features and bug fixes and isolation and code reviews and things like that, that becomes really important when you want to start collaborating with other people. All right, so some tools. These are the tools that I'm going to use in this presentation. The Git tools, obviously, we'll be using LiveCode. The first is source tree. I think it will be much easier to show you how Git works with a visual application. Source tree is free. You can get it at sourcetreeapp.com. It's made by Atlassian. It's a very good app. There's a lot of Git clients out there. Some are paid, some are free. This is just one you can use that's free, and I'll point you to that. I'll be using the terminal. I'll be using some the command line to perform some operations. As you get more familiar with Git, you really want to dive in and learn the command line, learn what the different commands are. It's very powerful, but you can be exposed to it gradually. As there's a lot you can do with Git using just a user interface, and then as you get more experience with it, you can dive into the terminal and use that. And there'll be a cameo appearance by Kaleidoscope. That's just to show you. So Kaleidoscope is an application. I think it's OS 10 only, but it shows you. It can show you differences between files, and I think it's a wonderful tool. I use it when I'm comparing. We'll talk about branches here in just a bit, but when I want to see the changes between two branches, Kaleidoscope is a very cool tool for doing that. The reason I'm showing it to you is just to demonstrate that when you start using Git, you get access to this whole world of tools that you can use to help improve the quality of your applications and to help you as you develop. So Kaleidoscope is just an example of that. This is a picture of source tree. This is what we're going to dive into in just a bit. What you see in the left column, you'll see there's a workspace, and we have what are called branches and tags and remotes and stashes, and we'll talk about some of those in just a bit. What you see in the right column, it's divided up into 4 sections there, but in the top row we have a history. That's the audit trail I talked about. That shows me all of the changes that have been made to my application, and I can actually cycle through those and see specifically what changed. And if you look down in the bottom right of the screen, you see that for bump version number, that was the change that was made. You see I changed my app.yml file, and I changed the build from 433 to 434. Okay, so that's what source tree will look like. Then we'll have the terminal, which is our good old friend. We all love terminal. And then this is what Kaleidoscope looks like. And so I'll show you some examples of that once. This gives you an idea of when you see these apps again, you'll know what they are. All right. Okay, so here are the Git concepts that we're going to use in this presentation. I'm going to talk about these. First will be a repo. So a repo, you can think of it as the folder that Git is monitoring. So if you follow along with the LiveCode development, there is a LiveCode repo. There's a LiveCode-IDE repo, and it's just a folder that Git is managing. It's going to watch all the changes in that folder. The next concept is a branch, and a branch is a workspace in, I'm going to describe it as a workspace in Git. So I can have multiple branches. Whenever you start working with Git, you want to be familiar with the master branch. Master is the default branch that exists, and you can create branches with any name you want, and you'll see how branches play into the workflow as we go through our demonstration today. Staging. Staging is an important concept in Git. I talked about Git being Git is snapshot based essentially, and so if you have a snapshot and you go into Git has a snapshot of what the folder contents look like at a specific moment in time, and if you go in and make changes to a file, then that file is considered modified, or if you add a file to the repository, then it's a new file has been added. And so staging is where this area in Git where you tell Git that you want to add these particular changes to the repo. So you'll say, okay, I changed this file. Yeah, I want to include that change, and I want to include this other change. And after you put files into the staging area, you can then do what's called a commit. And a commit is where you permanently store a new snapshot into your Git repository. And you can add a little message saying, okay, in this commit, I changed X, Y, and Z. Or you can say why you changed something, or this was a bug fix for bug 512 or whatever. Merging is the next concept in Git. We're going to talk about merging, that's where we might merge two branches together. So if I have one branch that has, my application, we'll call it the master branch, and then I create a new branch to work on a new feature or a bug fix. Once I'm done with that feature or bug fix, I'm going to merge those changes into the master branch. We're also going to talk about rebasing, which we'll get into. I'm not going to talk about it too much here. It'll be better to have a visual demonstration. And we'll talk about tags. Tags is how we kind of mark a specific snapshot in Git as being a release. So, if we have version 1, we can tag version 1 in the Git repo. And then we can go back to it later. All right, so let's get started with that background. Let me find my mouse. Where'd my mouse go? My mouse stopped working, of all things. There we are, it's back. My trackpad stopped working. Of all the things to happen. All right, so now that we have all that out of the way, we're going to get into, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the act of building an application and adding adding changes and additions to a Git repository. And right now, I'm going to start out, I'm going to work locally, and then as I get farther into the process, so all the changes I make are going to be stored in a Git repo on my computer. Now, I'm going to then later on create a Git repo on GitHub, and I'm going to push all my changes in my app up to GitHub. And that'll just show you that a Git repo can exist in many different locations. In fact, that's one of the powerful things about Git. And so we'll look at how we're going to do, how you can work with on a local Git repo as well as store your changes on a server. I'm going to do that on GitHub. So I've created a folder here called Bell Conductor. And this is actually an app that I have up on GitHub. It's a little app that I use for teaching music to kids. And so you'll kind of see how that evolves. So basically what I'm doing is I'm going to show you how we might put that together using Git. So I'm going to create a new Levure application. This is the Levure wiki. I'm on the creating an application page. I'm just going to copy this code here, and then I can go back to LiveCode and bring up the dialog, the little stack that, I'm sorry, I'm going to be moving most of the time when I open stacks. They appear on my other monitor, and I have to drag them over. So this is the little stack that creates new apps. I'm going to check the box that uses Git, and then I'm going to click Create Application. Then I am going to create the application inside of a folder I already created on my desktop. So the Levure project has now been created. So what I have now, let's change this around. We can hide the sidebar. So I created a new Levure application, okay? And I have the Levure folder, I have an app folder, I have the sample window that comes with every new app. So those are all the files in my application. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use source tree, and this is the source tree. I'm on the repository browser, and I'm going to add a new repository to source tree so that I can visually see what's going on in this folder. So I'm going to add, I click on this new button, I'm going to add an existing local repository. If I go to the desktop, I select the Bell Conductor folder, and I'll click open. And so here's what source tree shows. Remember we talked about staging? Staged files are up here. I'm going to make this a little wider. Staged files are up here. When Levure created this application, all the files that Levure added to the app were added to staging automatically. Levure performed that step for us. And so we can see there's a git ignore file that says, hey, don't monitor any of the files or folders in the builds folder. Don't include that in the repo. Have the Levure folder, the default scripts that get created. Now what I'm going to do is, in my app, I'm not interested in these sample windows. So I'm going to get rid of the sample windows. And see, as I uncheck those boxes, you see there's a section called unstaged files. And those are files that if I were to commit, I clicked in the commit box. I'm going to write a commit message here. And so we'll say initial commit. Okay. And if I click commit now, all those files that I added are now going to show up in my history. So initial commit, I see that Trevor Levure was the author. I'm going to make this window a little bigger here, make this one a little smaller, and you can see all the files that were changed or added or removed in this commit. Now, I still have these uncommitted changes here, so I didn't want to add this sample window to my repository because it's not a part of my app. So I'm just going to select them and right-click on them and say remove. And that's just like going in, and I could, in the Finder or Windows Explorer, I could go in and delete those. So that's my first commit. My app is now being monitored by Git. I've added the initial files to it. So let's start adding some functionality, and we'll see how Git helps us with app development, with with the auditing and adding features and things like that. All right, so I've now added my first commit. I'm going to start working on my second commit. And so what I've done is I have the app in a folder off screen that you can't see. I have snapshots of the app at different stages. And what I'm going to do is drag and drop files from that snapshot into this new app that I've created. So I'm replacing app.yml, and I'm going to add a configuration folder. To the UI. Okay. And actually, no, that was supposed to be. Oh, so I deleted the files in there, but actually just we'll get rid of that folder as well. Okay. So now if I go back to source tree, we're going to see that, oh, look, there's some more uncommitted changes. Okay. So what I see then is that, all right, some changes were made to the app.yml file. Okay. And so I'm going to say, okay, yeah, those look good. I gave the application a name, and then I added a binary stack. Now, in Git, binary stacks are just going to show up. A LiveCode stack is just going to show up like this. There's no preview available. And that's why we want to keep all the code, as much code as possible, out of binary stacks. Now, I also added a behavior script, and this behavior script, which I'll show you, is right. If we look in the configuration folder, there's a behavior, and that's going to get added to the repo. So all those changes look good to me. I'm just going to check the box up here. That's going to stage every change that I made. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up those changes in LiveCode, make sure they all look good. And so we'll do bell conductor app. I'm going to open up standalone.livecode, drag it onto the screen. Let's open it up, see what happens. Okay. And there was one file that did not get changed how I wanted it to be. I forgot to tell my app to, I forgot to drag in app.livecode script. So there's one file I'm missing. So I'll drag that one over. That needs to go in the app folder. Okay. So you see when I added files to staging, it didn't actually commit anything yet. So I can still make changes if I need to, if I find out something's wrong. Like, oh, okay, well, you know what I forgot to do? I wasn't opening the right stack. I was in Levure, I was still opening the sample window and not the configuration. So I make that change, and then I'm going to add that to the staged files. And so now that's part of the staged files. So that will be part of my commit. So I'm going to try opening the app again now. And we'll see if it works. And if it works, I'll go ahead and make the commit. So just need my file open dialog to show up. There we go. Beauty of 2 monitors. So this is my desktop folder. I'll open the standalone, drag that over, and now my configuration screen showed up. That is a thing of beauty. I love it. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to at this point. So now I'm going to switch back to source tree. And so now that I have this first part of my app done, I'm going to say add configuration screen. Okay, and so now I'm going to commit. There's going to be these 4 files up top that I'm going to commit. So now we've got the configuration screen changes that have been added to my history. So now I can go and I can look at the initial commit. Here's what I added to my app, and here's the configuration screen. And you can browse through the changes and see exactly what changed when I added the configuration screen. All right, everything is looking good there. Now we've looked at the history. Now one thing I want to point out now, I'm going to, in source tree, you see this branches section? I'm going to click show. And that shows me the branches that exist in my Git repo. And right now there's just this master branch. This master branch is what gets created when you have when you're working in a Git repo. And all my changes have been made on that Git repo, the master branch. I'm going to show you now how to work on another branch. I'm going to add a feature. I'm going to add preferences to this application. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new branch that's going to diverge from this master branch. And so I'm going to click the branch button. And I'm going to call it TKD prefs. Typically, when you're working on a project with lots of people, you'll use your initials. A lot of people will just use 2 initials, but you'll do your initials with a dash and then a description of the branch that you're working on. I'm going to work on some preferences, so I'm going to create a branch. And you see here that TKD prefs is now the branch that I'm working on. And if you were to go into the terminal, just to show you what this looks like, I'm going to do book conductor. I'm going to see, I have a little tool installed for my terminal that tells me which branch I'm on when I'm in a Git folder. And if I do Git status, you can say, okay, I'm on TKD prefs. That's the branch. And if I want to switch back to master, I do Git checkout master, and I switch to master. But I am going to work on pref. So all my changes are going to be made on this branch. So at any time, I could go back to master, and I would be in, my app would be in the state that it was when I just added the configuration screen. So let's go in and make the changes necessary for the preferences. So for preferences, what I'm going to do is drag in. Let's go to my next commit. So for preferences, there's a couple files that change. I'm going to add a file that contains default preferences. Actually, I'll just show you this so you can see what I'm doing. So it's not like you see everything's being done off screen. I'm going to drag in a new prefs file that I added. And I'm going to add in, I don't really want to move that. I want to copy that. So we're going to add that file in. And I'm going to add a new configuration file, updated configuration file, I should say. And I'm going to add, my dot keeps showing up there. I need to add an updated prefs to the card script, so configuration. We'll place that. And then lastly, I have an updated app.livecode script. Okay, and so what that's going to give me, so there are the changes that I've made. This will be the next phase of my application where I put source tree. Okay, so here's source tree. Now look, I changed those files, and so my uncommitted changes show up. So, you know, I might make changes to these files gradually as I'm working on as I'm working on the app. And okay, so in app.livecode script, I'm now going to save preferences whenever I shut down, before the application is shut down, I'm going to make sure I save those preferences. That looks good. I'm going to go ahead and stage that. Next, I've added the names of the preference files. So the default name is, it's set. I have a specific pref file name on Windows. And I'm also, when I go ahead and package up my application, I want to include this prefs.yml file. Those changes look good. I'll add those. Here's this prefs.yml file. Those add default values to the application, to preferences. So if I try to get the start delay pref and it hasn't been set on that computer yet, it'll have a default value of 0. And then lastly, on my configuration screen that I've created, I want to start setting the values of the fields to the preference value. And whenever I make a change in on the configuration screen, I want to go ahead and save that preference. So I'm going to add that as well. So, and I will say, and I can say this, well, actually, I was going to do that next stage. So I've made those changes now, and so I'm going to go ahead and commit those. So let's go to file status. I can type in a commit message. Preferences. Go ahead. Stay out of there. I'm going to go ahead and commit that. So I've now made this commit. Now, if we go to history, you'll notice something a little different. Now I have this master branch, which you can see here. This is the commit that the master branch is associated with, this add configuration screen. TKD prefs, on the other hand, is associated with this add preferences commit. And so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to merge. So what I've done is I've finished this feature. I've checked my application. I've opened it up. It works great. The preferences work as they should. And so now I want to bring that feature into the master branch. So if I was going to use source tree for that, I'd switch over to master. I double clicked on it and it became the active branch. Then I can right click on TKD prefs and I can say merge TKD prefs into master. And I'm going to say okay. And now you notice what happened, master and TKD prefs now both point to that add preferences commit. And so that feature's been added. And once the feature's been added, if I'm done with it, I can go ahead and delete TKD prefs. It disappears, but notice that add preferences still sticks around. My app still has all the changes that I made there. All right, so we're good to go there. So that's an introduction then to how you might use a branch to add a feature. All right, next, let's go in. I'm going to add a whole bunch of features.
Right there a second, Trevor. We have a couple of questions popping up in the questions here.
I am going to come back. I'm going to come back to those. So it's I'm going to answer those at the end. I'm going to get through this, and then we can go through, because once you see everything kind of come together, it'll be easier to explain. Like I see a question there on branching, and why you might want to use branching. That'll be easier to explain after I've finished the demo on this. So in this case, I'm going to actually push through, and then we'll come back to questions after. All right. So for the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new branch because I'm going to add another feature here. I now have a configuration screen that works, and I want to add playback. So I want to, if you saw the screenshot, you saw the stack that allows you to do some configuration in the app. Now we want to actually, this app needs to, it's kind of like a Guitar Hero style display that sends notes across the screen. I'm going to add that feature now. So I'm going to create a new branch because I want to work on this in isolation. And this example will actually demonstrate why branches are useful. This is a more useful example of why you might want to use branches. So I'm going to call this one TKD playback. Okay. And this time around, this feature is quite significant. There's going to be a lot of changes. So I'm going to actually do a couple commits over time while I'm working on this feature. So let me bring up my snapshot. Let's hide the sidebar there. All right, so on the left these are the snapshots of my app. So I'm going to drag these files in to the app I'm actually working on rather than making all the changes by hand. So first, I'm going to add I'm going to add note templates. So let's go ahead and drag that in. It's going to be a UI element. Okay. I'm going to add node templates. Then I'm going to launch LiveCode, and we will see what that looks like. Okay. So here's my configuration screen that we already saw right there. And then I'm going to go stack node templates. And here are some templates. So these are templates that I'm going to use for displaying various notes. As I move the mouse over, you can see I have F4 sharp, F4, E3, and these correspond to bells. There's little bells that kids can use to play songs. And eventually we'll add color to these, but right now I have a different note for each of the bells that the kids might play. So I'm like, okay, that looks good. That's what I want it to be for the moment. I'm going to go back and I'm going to commit those changes. So there's a behavior script and a binary file. I'm going to stage both of those. I'm going to say add note templates, because those are going to get copied during, those are the graphics I'm going to use during playback. And they're templates. So I'm going to commit that. Now, if I go to my history, once again, we see that master branch is still stuck to add preferences, but TKD playback is now associated with this add note templates commit. All right, let's make the next change. So the next change I'm going to add is I'm going to add some libraries that help my configuration screen and the playback screen that I want to add communicate. So I'm going to add some libraries to my Levure app. Add those there. And I'm also going to update this card script in the configuration screen, assuming that my operating system lets me drag and drop. Okay, and so I updated that as well. And let's go ahead and see what those changes are. So what I've done this time around is I added this library, and I use that for some community. I'm not going to get into all the reasons why that's not as important, but they're important for this app to work. And then, as you notice, I've updated the card script for my configuration screen. So for this screen right here, I've updated it so that it will use this, what I call the current session library. It now uses the current session library to store, okay, what are the notes that we're going to play and what's the tempo. You also see there's a little playback thing there. So, okay, that looks good to me. I like those changes. I'm going to commit that. And so I'm going to add a session library. That's the primary thing that I've done there. So I'm going to go ahead and commit that. All right. So now I go back to history and notice that there's a bigger, I have two commits now between TKD playback and master. So I'm building up these commits within this TKD playback branch. I'm going to make a couple more commits, but they're not affecting master at all. I could go back to master at any time and my app would still be in the right state there. Okay. So the next change I'm going to make, let's go ahead and hide that. We'll hide that. Is I'm going to add the play screen. So I have this playback folder. I'm going to add that to the UI. And I'm going to add animation engine because I use that for the playback as well. Okay. So, and lastly, I'm going to add just one more file. I'm going to add I'm going to update app.livecode script because that has some more stuff I need for playback. All right, so this is actually, let's see. So we're going to go to source tree. This has some more changes. I'm going to test these before I commit them, but you'll see that actually, so uncommitted changes is what I need. So you see I have some staged files here. When the app starts up, it's going to set some default values. I've got animation engine I've added. I added a playback card that I'll show you here in just a minute, and also the behavior for that playback stack. So I'm going to test these out and see how it goes. So I'm going to I'm restarting each time because I keep adding all these files that I've dragged in, and so I restart the app to load everything up again. Bell conductor standalone. So we're going to go ahead and open the app up, and let's see if my changes worked out as I'd want them to. Here's a configuration screen. I'm going to load a song from the menu. Looks good. I'm going to click play. And there's my app. Okay, so now my notes are playing. Their animation engine sending them across the screen. When they hit that bar, they tells the kids to play the bell, and everything seems to be working as it should. So double click to stop that. Everything looks good. I've tested it. I'm ready to commit those changes. So I'm going to say, let's go ahead and add the playback stack. Now my history's been updated. You see I have 3 commits between my playback branch and my master branch. So that now I've made a bunch of changes to my app, okay? And at this point, I might be wondering, okay, so I'm the only person working on it, right? I'm the only person working on it at this point. Now, if I was working with other programmers, you know, I would be working on this playback branch in isolation. But then maybe I want another coder, another programmer to look at it. I might push this branch up to the server, the main server where all of our, the central code repo. In this case, it might be GitHub, which I'll show you in a minute. But another programmer could then review these changes, and he could see, what have you changed here? What's different? Does that look right? Have you approached this the right way? Did you organize the files the right way? And SourceTree gives me a way to compare 2 branches. So let's say another programmer was to take a look at this, and they downloaded this TKD playback branch to their computer. You can right-click on master, and you can say diff against current. And what that does is that loads up all the files that have been changed since the master branch. So these are all the files I've changed in TKD playback, and I can scroll through them and see exactly what was changed. Now, this works great if you want to review and see what was changed. Now, I mentioned Kaleidoscope earlier, just as a tool that's kind of cool. And I've hooked up a command in my terminal called Git KS review. What that does is that loads up Kaleidoscope, and it shows me that a similar view to SourceTree, but I have a lot more options for how I view the changes. So these were additions, as you can see. This shows me all the changes in context, and if I go to a file that had more changes to it, so card.livescript, in the bottom corner here you see a change 1 of 4. This is just an example of, when you start using Git, there's a lot of tools that you can use. There's a lot of people who've spent time improving workflows. Kaleidoscope's one that I use a lot, especially when I want to review work from another programmer. I just download their branch, I fire up Kaleidoscope, and I can see exactly what they changed without having to really guess. So it's a good way of monitoring changes over time there. Okay, now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get this ready to upload to GitHub. But first, what I want to do is I want to merge my changes into master. Now, this is where I'm going to introduce you to the concept of rebase. So while I was working on playback, right now, SourceTree is showing you all the branches. I'm just going to switch to the current branch, to keep TKD playback. Okay, so I guess that doesn't really affect anything in this particular view. If we had more branches and things, it would. My TKD playback branch, the whole purpose of this was to add the playback feature. Now, while I was adding this feature, as a developer, I was, I'm making different changes. Maybe I added a file and then later I needed to remove it. But my branch, my TKD playback branch, could have gotten messy. I could have had commits in there that I didn't need. And even now, I may not want all 3 of these commit messages to be in my master branch. I might just be interested in the fact that this is the point where playback was added to the app. That was the major feature we were adding, was playback. And I don't want parts, I don't want 3 commits that represent adding playback. I want 1 commit. And that commit is all the playback feature. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go into the terminal now, and we're going to look at a feature called rebase. And so what rebase allows me, rebase can do a lot of different things, but what I'm going to demonstrate to you now is how you use rebase to kind of rewrite history. So what I'm going to do is I want to merge TKD playback into master, but I'm going to use this rebase command, git rebase-i, and master is the branch that I'm going to rebase against. So what I'm saying is Git's going to take this TKD playback branch, and it's going to allow me to rewrite the changes that are going to be applied to master eventually. So I press return, and my editor of choice pops up, and you see there I have a list here. You see those commit messages I made. There's 3 of them: add note templates, add session library, add playback stack. What I'm going to do is I'm going to squash those. I only want one commit to appear in my master branch. So I'm going to write squash. I've just typed S as well. And that's going to tell Git now to use the first commit, which is add note templates, and to combine these next 2 commits with that first commit. So I'm going to save the file and close it. And so you see that Git starts doing this rebase. It opened up another file where I'm going to write a new commit message. And my message that I'm going to write is just called add playback. I'm going to delete all this other stuff. So add playback. I'm going to save the file and close it. Once I close it, Git will keep going. And now you see Git did some work. And if I come back and refresh, now we notice there's only one commit between master and playback. It's called add playback, and it has all the files that I modified. So now I can go into master. I'll double click on master. Actually, I'm going to do this from the command line. So git status, you can see that master is my current branch. I'm going to do git merge. I'm going to merge TKD playback into master. So you'll notice that master and playback now point to the same feature. So this branch, this TKD playback branch, gave me this playground, this isolated environment where I could work on the feature, experiment, get it just how I wanted it to be. And then once it was done, I used this git rebase-i that you saw. And again, git rebase-i to rewrite the history, to kind of flatten everything so that I didn't have as many commits in my master branch. All right. Okay, time's getting short, so we're going to move right along so we can get to questions. I'm just going to show you quickly how you would what you do for GitHub. So I'm going to go to my GitHub account, and I'm going to create. So I'm at github.com, and this is my account. I'm going to add a new repository, and I'm going to call this my bell conductor. Okay, I'm going to make it a public repository because I've already created a Git repository on my computer. I'm not going to initialize it with anything. I'm just going to create the repository. And GitHub's really friendly in that after you create a new repo, it gives you all the code you need to set things up. So it says, quick setup. Okay, am I creating a new repository on the command line? No, I'm going to push an existing repository from the command line. So I'm going to tell my Git repository, the bell conductor one that I created, I'm going to tell it how to find GitHub. And so I just copy and paste that command. And if I switch back to source tree, you'll see, ooh, I now have a remote. Okay, that's good. That was added. Now I'm going to push my changes. So I've made my changes. Sometimes you pull changes, like if I wanted to pull something from GitHub, I could. In this case, I'm going to push. And I can execute that command in the terminal, or I can come into source tree, and I can say, click the push button, and that'll push it up to the master branch. I'm going to push up the master branch, push that up to my origin, which is GitHub. So I'm going to do that. Okay, that was done. So now if I refresh GitHub, there's my app. I can click on commits. You see all the different commits I made. I can browse those in my browser. You can see all the changes I made. So now my app is on the web, and I can start collaborating with other people if I want to. So that was pretty easy. All right, so here I'm going to do one final change to the app. Then that gets it ready for release. So I'm going to get into a release state. I'm going to show you how to use tagging, and then we will go into questions. So for the last change I want to do is I want my notes to be colored, because the bells that the kids play, each of them is a different color. And so if I can change the color of the notes in my note templates, then the kids will be able to visually match what they see on the screen with the bell they're holding in their hand, and they'll know when to play. And it actually works really well. So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to relaunch my LiveCode app. Get this out of your way. And open the app up again. Here's my configuration screen. Do this song and click play. And there we have colors. All I did was I changed the colors of each of these notes. And so now when the song's being read, we get different colored notes. The kids can see which bell to play, and you can have a bunch of kids playing a song for you. So that all works great. So what I'm going to do, sorry, I did not want to switch screens. I wanted to switch apps. I'm going to add this last commit. Actually, I'll delete TKD playback. I don't need that anymore. And this last commit, I didn't bother making a new branch. You don't have to create a new branch. I'm just making a simple change here. And so I'm going to say add colors to notes. Now you see that there's this checkbox in source tree. It says you can push your changes immediately to origin master. What that means is origin master, that origin is this remote. That's GitHub. So I'm going to actually commit the change. It's going to save the change locally to my GitHub account here, or to my local Git repository. But then it also pushed it up to GitHub. If I refresh the page, see, oh, add colors to notes. That's cool. All right. Now, last thing, I've got my app ready to release. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a snapshot I'm going to tag a snapshot. So what I do is I can go in and say, you know what, this is the commit where version 1 of my app was. And so I can right click and say tag. And when you name, you want to use semantic versioning. And I like to, you can start with a V. I'm going to say this is version, actually this is going to be version 0.5.0 because the configuration screen is still ugly, so it's not ready for release. So I'm going to check this box that says push the tag to origin. So the tag is going to get created both on my machine and it's going to get sent up to GitHub. I'm going to click add. Source tree will do all its magic in the background. And now what you'll see on GitHub, it's kind of cool. When I'm in my code view, I now have a release. I can click on release and it says, oh, there's your release. I can download a zip file with all the source code if I want. GitHub also has tags. I could add release notes and say, this is the release, here's what changed. I can keep all that. I can add some notes there. Now the cool thing is, so that's what it does with the browser. Now the cool thing here is I can revert my app to different states just by double clicking on a commit history. So well, let's see, if I right click, might want to say, you know what, I want to check out this preference. And we'll say, okay. And so I checked it out. And so now my app is actually in the state where I haven't added playback and I haven't added the colors to the notes. So I could go back and see what the code looks like there. Then I can go back to master. I can go right back to the state that I was with where I added the colors. And just by clicking on these, going through these commits, you can jump around to different states of your app. So for example, if I add 5 more commits and I get to version 1, but I want to go back and test what version 0.5 looked like, well, I could go back to, well, I'd right click. I can't right click on it now because it's the most current, but I can right click and say, I want to create a branch, and I need to do some some testing on this particular tag. I'd create a branch, and now this branch has my app in the exact state it was in when I released version 0.5. I can do all the testing, troubleshooting I want, and so it's a snapshot. I can roll back, and just by changing branches, I can go from version 5, but maybe my master's on version 1, and so I can jump around that way. So I'm going to stop there. That covers all the major topics that well, there was one more thing I want to talk about, but I'm going to get into questions, and I think I can mention this last point as we go through questions. But that's an introduction to how you can start using Git with LiveCode, and how branching and different things work and tagging works to kind of manage your application flow. So let's get into some questions. I'm going to scroll back through the history now of questions. So give me a moment while I just read through what we have. Let's see. So I'm trying to get to the point where I have the questions. There's a lot of chat here. Okay, so the first question was, why does one need to branch? What's the advantage of branching? This was a question by Mark. So hopefully as I went through the rest of the branch demos, it made a little more sense. But branching, so let me show you an example of another repo. Let me show you my Screen Steps repo. So this is the app, my application that I'm working on right now. And let me hide some of the unimportant things. I am currently working on a couple different features and testing some different things. So I have my master branch, which is my app. That's the code that's been tested and it's ready for release. And you can see I have a tag here, version 4.04. I have some other tags. You go down version 4.04.429. So I've got tags in there, but I can switch. I'm adding a new checkbox feature to my application, and this is a feature that I've been working on for a few weeks. Now, while I've been working on this feature, I've also been fixing bugs and sending them fixes to customers, like hot fixes. And I've been working on some other features. You can see here I did a whole branch when I was adding TSNet to my application. I had a branch. At any time, I can leave what I'm doing for this checkbox feature and switch back to master. I have some changes here I haven't committed yet, but I switch back to master, make any, I could create a new branch for a bug fix, get that into master, create a new installer, send it off to my customer, and then instantly switch back to the checkbox branch that you see here and continue work on that. So like I said at the beginning, it allows me to isolate the work I'm doing. Now, when you start working with other programmers, then you're going to, branches become really important because you can't just have a whole bunch of programmers committing to your master branch. They need to be working on their features in their own, they need to be working on their own little branches that are specific to a feature. And once they're done, they can submit it for review. And then, whoever's in charge of the repository can then merge it into master. And so it lets us isolate the changes and incorporate the changes only when they're ready and when the feature is finished. So. Okay, let's see what the next question is. So when you test, can it pull code from all branches? No, so when you're testing, you're gonna be testing a specific branch. You could merge changes from different branches into, so like if I have changes in this checkbox, in the checkbox, this checkbox type branch, I could merge those into master, or I could create another branch that included the changes from master and checkbox together, or 2 or 3 branches. But you have to merge. Your files can only, in your folder, are always going to represent the current branch. And well, there's some exceptions to that, but we're not going to go into that. Like when you're doing rebasing and stuff, things get all mixed up. But you have to be, whatever your current branch is, that's what you're going to be testing. Okay. So I have another question here. When you rebase and squash commits, do you lose all the comments in the commit? Can you unsquash if you needed to see the original comments? You will lose well, you won't lose them necessarily. I deleted the comments in the second stage of the rebase. First, I choose the commits I want. Martin asked this. And then after I choose the commits that I want and how I want to squash them, then I can choose what I want the comments to be. So sometimes I will keep the comments from multiple commits, and that'll become part of the commit message. But you can't go back and unsquash. So just all you got to do is update the comments. You can merge the comments together. You can squash commits, but you don't have to squash the comments. And in fact, when you decide what your comments are going to be, Git shows you all the comments from all the commits, and you choose which ones you want to keep. Hopefully that answers that question. Say Mark. So Mark says you can't test your checkbox until you merge, or your checkbox is completely standalone, not dependent on any of your other master branch code. That's a great question, Mark. So when I created my checkbox branch, it was created off of the master. So if we look at the history here, okay, so here's my checkbox branch, and where's master? You see I made a lot of changes, and here's master. So checkbox and master have a shared history. And so basically what's happening is Git is taking a snapshot of master at the point when I created the checkbox branch. And so yeah, they have that shared history together. And so when I'm checking checkbox, I'm checking checkbox plus whatever master was at the point when I created the checkbox branch. Now, when I go back and merge, then Git is going to combine everything that happened since the last shared change. So if I was to merge these, all the commits from this point, because this is where master's at, all the commits from this commit here up to this commit there would get merged. Now I'm going to squash those, but that's what would happen. Okay. So Tim asks, is squash the same as merge and source tree? No, squash and merge are not the same. Merging is where you're just going to, when you saw my example, squash is associated with rebasing. Okay. Merging is when you just say, you know what, take the changes in this branch and just move them all into this other branch and just do it. Don't ask me any questions. I just want you to go ahead and do it. Now, sometimes you'll get what are called merge conflicts, and you can read about those. But the merge is just going to dump everything. It's going to merge one branch with another branch, and it's just going to do it. Rebasing allows you to rewrite history. It allows you to change the number of commits that are going to get merged. And so rebasing isn't a merge, but rebasing is rewriting the history. And after you rewrite that history, then you merge, and it creates a cleaner merge. Rebasing, you could say it creates a cleaner merge. And there's some other situations where you need to do it, but that's in our case, that's the general idea. And Mark says the light bulb goes on. Okay, very good. All right, so hopefully those are all the questions I see. If you had a question that I did not answer, throw it into the message box now. And if you have a question you just thought of. So one last question here. It says regarding merge, does it merge into branch you are on or from the branch you are on? How do you make sure it's going the right way? It is going to merge into the branch you are on. So if you are in terminal, so got master here. So yeah, I did mean I'm on master there. Actually, I'll show you from the screen steps one. So when I wanted to merge this checkbox branch, I would switch over to master. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to get rid of my changes yet, and I could stash them, but we're not going to do that. I'd switch to master, and then I'd right click on checkbox, and I would say merge, and it would say merge checkbox into master. And from the command line, I would check out master, and I'd say git. If I was in my screen steps repo, I would say git merge tkd add checkbox type, and then it would bring checkbox into master. Okay. So you're always going to merge into the branch that you're on. Any other questions? We're out of time, so
we are somewhat out of time. Yes.
I don't want to put Heather too behind. So last question: if you make changes to an already staged file, do you have to unstage and stage it again? No. You can actually in source tree you'll see that you'll have the file that's already been staged. Like let's say it's up there already, and then it'll show up again down here with the changes you made since you added it to staging last, and you just check the box again, and it would combine it into. It would have one list of changes, so you can keep adding to the staging even after. Staging is not permanent. Commits are permanent. You can, yeah. So that's a good way to think of it. So. Okay, well, that is it. Heather, I should close up shop here. And if people have questions, I am in Slack. I'll be stepping in and out today, but I'll be around Slack, so you can ask questions in there as well.
Yeah, that'd be great if you want to pop over there and see if we've got any more, because that was really interesting. There's a lot in that presentation.
There's a lot, and it's hard to get it all into one presentation, but hopefully it turned on some light bulbs for some people.
Okay, so I need to turn this one off. I need to turn the next one on, and we're going to be back with Michael and databases in just a couple of minutes. So folks, go and check your email for your next sign up link. Remember, you have to sign up for each of these presentations or refresh the page. Okay.
Thanks, Heather. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.